President of All India Heritage Preservation Organization of All India Digambar Jain Mahasabha. Many of you I know very well, and thank you very much for joining. Let us start with Professor Kebede today instead of Professor Ajit Prasad, because there are likely chances that the power shutdown may or be there in Ethiopia. So let me start with him. So I'm very much glad to introduce my today's guest, Professor Kebede Amere Bele, who will talk today on some similarities between Ethiopian churches and Jain temples. Professor Kebede is currently actually doing PhD. See, this is a big motivation for all of us that after the age of 60 years, he has started the PhD. He is doing PhD in cultural anthropology at Mekelle University, where he is currently assistant professor. Professor Kebede actually started his career after completion of his MA as a school education, and from the starting as a school teacher, he reached to the very big height to assistant director of school education, and then he also worked as an acting director in the Shehman Comprehensive this high school over there. Then he changed his profession, completely a big change in his career, in his life, and he went to the some kind of a new business on tourism and cultural relationship, and there also he touched to the big height of his career. He served as a commissioner for tourism and culture, and as a general manager of this whole agency for cultural and tourism, Bureyu, and head of the cultural and tourism in Tigray region. The Tigray region, you know that last time when I gave keynote address, that is very important for all of us Jains because the Yeha temple, this Axiom, all these are temples, and particularly Sabian tradition is developed over there before this Ethiopia came into the existence. And from January 2016 to present, he is assistant professor in Mekelle University, the Institute of Paleo Environment and Heritage Conservation. He is teaching, and I came into contact with him in 2017 when I visited Mekelle University, and then we developed this whole Jainism exploration, and he is very active, very so with these kind words. Hello, can you hear me? All of you, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we will have it.
So, dear friends, I'm now inviting my today's guest speaker, Professor Kebede Amere, who also is expert in Tigrayan language, Amharic language of Ethiopia, and he knows English. So he has a very interesting subject today on the similarities between Ethiopian churches and Jain temples. So I humbly and sincerely I invite Professor Kebede. Professor Kebede, please start your presentation. Thank you very much for considering us to give this presentation. Professor Kebede.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajmal, for your kind introduction. And I know that President of the All India Digambar Jain Heritage Preservation Organization is there, Babuji is there, and the rest of you. Jai Jinendra.
Jai Jinendra.
Jai Jinendra. So I thank you for this opportunity. I will share my knowledge with you based on the exposition I had in India and the visits to different temples, Jain temples in India. Before my presentation, before my talk, I would like to give some comments on last week's discussions. The first point that I want to emphasize is the names in Ethiopia that you have tried to associate with Adinat. There are a lot of names in Ethiopia that are that start with Adi. So this Adi means, in Ethiopian context, Adi means area of, land of, or place of something. For instance, when we say Adi Grad, it means area of cultivable land. When we say Adi Kaye, it means land of the red ones, the beautiful ones. When we say Adi Arkai, it means the land of bamboo. When we say Ona Adi, it means land of the ruined structure. So you have to understand the word Adi in this context. And therefore, if the word Adi has something derived from Adinat, this has to be studied. But in our context, in Ethiopian context, the word Adi still refers to either a place of, or a land of, or an area of. The second point is Addis Ababa is related with Adi. I don't agree with that because Addis means new, Ababa is flower. So new flower, Addis Ababa is new flower. It doesn't have anything to do with Adi or with Adinat. Therefore, the relationship with certain things could be possible, but it has to be based on the contextual meaning. This is one of my comments. The second comment is Professor Rajmal has explained about Aksum, not Axum, but Aksum, because Aksum is a combination of two words. Ak is water, Sum is chief. So it refers to the chief who was responsible for the water source. So it has to be properly pronounced, Aksum. And when we spell it, it is not A-X-U-M, as it is mostly found in literatures. It has to be A-K-S-U-M, Aksum. So these are my comments on last week's presentation and discussions, but the rest was perfect, and I agree with what Professor Rajmal Jain has said. Now I will come to my presentation. As you can see, my topic is some similarities between Ethiopian churches and Jain temples. And this presentation is based on my exposition to Jainism and based on my observation when I visited some temples of Jain belief in India. Therefore, for this presentation, I have to appreciate the assistance made by All Indian Digambar Jain Heritage Preservation Organization and the president in particular, Babuji. With his generous help, I was able to visit India 4 times, and I was able to attend 2 courses on Jainism. One is the summer course of last year, and the other is the 4 weeks program in Jainism. Therefore, I am very much grateful for the assistance given to me by Mahasabha and the president in particular. So based on this observation, based on this knowledge, I will have to proceed to my presentation. The similarities are basically on rock structures. As you know, there are rock or cave structures in India and elsewhere in the world. And in Ethiopia, there are a lot of cave or rock churches in the northern part of the country, especially in Tigray and the Amhara region. And these rock churches are basically either churches built or hewn out of a living rock for the purpose of church, or have been used for other purposes and then developed into a church. I will show you some examples. Here are some of the examples. This is a rock church which is free in all three directions from the main cliff. The same is true to here, and the same is true here. These are structures, beautiful structures that are existing in Tigray. And you can see here, you have to climb a cliff, and here you have to go through a cliff to find a church. So this shows the exterior of some of the rock churches of Ethiopia or Tigray. And this shows the interior. The interior is either decorated with religious paintings or left as it is. So you can see the original structure like this one, if you can see it. And this is adorned with religious paintings. And here you can see a church in a cave with timber structure. I will talk about it later. And here is again another cave church with religious painting. So these are some of the examples of rock churches in Ethiopia and in Tigray. Then my observation on the similarities starts with exterior features. While I attended the celebration for Bahubali in one of your beautiful sites, I had a chance to visit southern India. So while I was visiting southern India, I found this structure. I don't know the exact place where I found this, but it is in southern India. And the other part is the Church of Lalibela, Madhani Alam Church of Lalibela. And as you can see, this both church and temple have pillars outside the main building. And there is a passage, a cloister between the main building and the pillars. So how come that there are similarities? There are a lot of pillars in the Indian temple and a lot of pillars in the church of Beit Madhani Alam in Lalibela. So this is striking. And it shows the possible influence, architectural influence either way, either from here to India or from India to here. So this is one possibility or one similarity between the temples and churches in question. The second one is interior designs. Interior designs are also similar. If you can see, the ones to my left, that is to your right, are the pictures to your right are from India. The pictures to your left are from Ethiopia. So you can see the similarities. So pillars of different sizes are seen in both structures. In the Indian side, you see pillars, and in the Ethiopian side, you see pillars. When we go to pillars, in Ethiopia, we say we have two types of pillars. One is the type of pillar with four capitals, with capitals on four sides of the pillar. And if you have four capitals in a column or in a pillar, then that means the structure is, there is an arc. So these four pillars or these four capitals support these pillars. But when we compare the similarity between an Indian temple and an Ethiopian church, we have only two capitals. And these two capitals support the beams. So beam goes straight, arcs are a bit bended. So this is one similarity. This is a beautiful church in Ethiopia, and this is a beautiful temple in Shrivan Belgola, where I had the chance to visit with Babuji. So this is one similarity. When we go to the interior, you can see the similarity of the structure. Again, this is in Shrivan Belgola, temple. I don't know. I forget the name of the temple, but this is in Shirvan-Belgola, and this is in Aksum. So structurally, they are similar. So we can observe also differences. The purpose, the use of these two temples, this temple and funerary chamber are different, but architecturally you can observe similarities between these two. So why a structure in Shirvan-Belgola is similar to a structure in Aksum? This is again another interesting question. The third one is timber structure. In Ethiopia, we have churches that are cut out of rock, and we have churches that are built by combining timber and stone. So in Ethiopia, it is said that timber structures are either a copy of rock churches or the reverse. Rock churches are the copy of a timber structure. So when I say a timber structure, it is a combination of mostly wood structures supported by stone pillars and stone masonry. So you can see the striking similarity of woodwork here in Indian temple and woodwork here in a very interesting church in Ethiopia. So it's not only in cave churches or in rock churches that I find similarity, but even in timber structures, I find striking similarity between Indian temples and Ethiopian churches. This is very interesting, and it will be the basis for further research and for further study. It's not only this timber structure, the decoration that I found in some temples in India and in some churches in Tigray in Ethiopia are also have some sort of similarities. The one again on your right is a door frame in Shirvan-Belgola again, the temple that I have visited with Babuji, and these are found in some of the churches in Tigray. So you can see how the wood is curved to decorate a church, and mostly window frames or door frames. So this decoration, and it needs a lot of effort to decorate a wood to become a door frame or a window frame with marvelous decoration patterns. So how come that there are similarities between our church in Ethiopia and Indian temples, Indian Jain temples in India? This is another interesting similarity. Interestingly, you can see a specific design in one of the temples. Do you hear me? Hello? Professor?
बाबूजी आ गए.
Do you hear me?
पता नहीं उसने क्यों नीतू ने टेलीफोन किया.
Hello? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
We are able to hear you. Yes, please go ahead.
Good, thank you very much. This is again a simple decoration motif that I found in Shirvan-Belgola. And interestingly, I found one similar church decoration in Ethiopia, in Tigray. And both are wood decorations. When we come to perfection, to execution, they can be of different precision, but you can see the similarities. So these woodwork similarities are also of interesting points of discussion or interesting points of further research. Now I will come back to the other similarities of architectural similarities. I know that Professor Rajmal has talked about this, but it's good to supplement my ideas with his beautiful presentation. Water spouting systems are seen specifically in three sites in Ethiopia, in Tigray. One is in Yeha, which we call the Moon Temple. The other is in Mannabeti, and the third one is in Adi Akau, what we call Almuka Temple. So these water spouts are of two types, according to our understanding. The first type, as you can see in the picture, is a flat structure laid on the ground and has single outlet, either as the center or left or right side of the edge. So this is again in Shiravan-Belgola, and this is in Mannavati, an open air ruin of a church. We found this with Bapuji when I took him and his group to visit the site. So what is the service of this? What is the service of this? The second one is a built decorative structure supporting and raising it from the ground, and sometimes with draining canals and collecting vessels at the lower level. So this is again in Shiravan-Belgola, in the beautiful temple that I have visited, and this is in Adi Akawa. So the interesting structure is this water spout that you see here, and the same is true here. This is when Bapuji was and his group was visiting the sites in Tigray with Professor Mandal and myself. Then the issue is, according to archaeologists in Ethiopia, the suggestion is that the flat ones had been used for showering, while those with raised structure were used as sacrificial altars. I repeat, they are used as sacrificial altars. This is according to archaeologists working in Ethiopia, be it from Germany, from Italy, and from France and elsewhere. They label them as sacrificial altars. However, scholars from the Jain studies are again of different opinion. You know what their opinion is? These were not artificial sacrificial altars, but they were something for pouring water and milk over a respected deity, what you call abhishek. Okay, so this suggests that this has been a reflection of Jainism, and the altars have been used to drain liquids such as water or milk. So there are possibilities. It could be or it could not be. I don't want to agree or to argue on this point. However, I have a question that has to be answered. One issue for discussion is, do liquids like water and milk leave stains on sandstone structures or not? Scientific research may help us definitely answer the usage of these structures, because you don't find stains there. They look clean. They look clean and they look fresh. So do we have specific knowledge whether these liquids, water and milk, leave their stains wherever they are poured? So if you have answers to this could be a point of discussion. Other similar structure again in Mannavati. This is the Ethiopian side, I'm sorry. And this is the Jain temple site. So look at this structure and look at this structure. You find similarities, and strikingly, how come? And they are besides what you call with the structures used for showering in the earliest period. So these striking structures found in Ethiopia and in India are good research topics or good research areas. The other point is similarity in swastika. When I went to India and when I was taught about what the swastika symbol means in Jain belief, I was totally caught with surprise, because the knowledge we have with swastika is different from the knowledge I gained in India. What is the swastika for us? What is the swastika for us? The swastika for us, for Ethiopians, is swastika is or has the meaning of truth, righteousness, and justice. This has been related with our Orthodox Christianity. And I understood that the modern name for this icon, for this symbol was derived from the Indian Sanskrit, which is svastika. and that means conducive to well-being. Then this symbol has been used by cultures around the world for different purposes throughout history. One, as a symbol in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. Second, as a stylized cross in Christianity. I repeat, as a stylized cross in Christianity. Third, in ancient Asiatic culture as a pattern in art. And as you remember, in our modern period, Hitler has used this swastika as his symbol for his decoration, military decoration. So it has been in use for ages, from its first appearance till today. It has been used in several patterns. Then, being a cross, one of the regions using this symbol was Christianity in the Middle Ages. Underline, Christianity in the Middle Ages. I know that swastika has been used in India, Jain belief, long before that. But when it comes to Christianity, it has been used as a symbol of Christianity in the Middle Ages and referred to as a gammadion, a group of 4 Greek letters, gamma, the capitalized third letter of the Greek alphabet. And each gamma represents one of the 4 evangelists. We have 4 evangelists in our religion who radiate from the central Greek cross, which represents Christ. Then, how did the symbol arrive to Ethiopia? The symbol arrived from Greece via Egypt to Ethiopia. The Greeks themselves inherited the symbol from Armenia. In Armenia, it was the ancient symbol of eternity and eternal light. So, from Greek to Egypt and from Egypt to Ethiopia. Is it possible? Is it possible? Is that the possible explanation that anyone could give? You can see the pictures. Do you hear me, Professor? Are you there?
Yes, yes.
Good.
I'm able to, yes, we are able to hear. Everyone is hearing.
Good. So this one is church ceiling, and you can see the swastika, well decorated. And you can see the shape of a cross in between. So it is a combination of the swastika itself and some church. This is in Tigray, and this is in Lalibela. You can see the swastika perfectly, and you can see a cross accompanying it. And here is again in Tigray, you can see the swastika design and the sign of the design of a cross. So cross and swastika are related. How come that these are related? Because swastika has a different meaning that has been adapted to Christianity, but its original meaning is not related to Christianity. So in Ethiopian church, you find this type of decorations or designs in several churches. When you go to Tigray, you will find them in multiple of churches, built and rock churches. Then there are possible issues for discussion. How come that there are similarities between Indian temples and Ethiopian Christian churches? One point of discussion is ancient Abyssinia had trade or otherwise links with India. This is true. How intensive has this link been? This has to be studied. Second, there are evidences of Sabian influence in Ethiopia. The Sabians are originally, as we are told, they are originally from the other side of the Red Sea, that is from Yemen and Saudi Arabia. The third point is Christianity came into Ethiopia from Greek via Egypt. So these are possible areas to start our study from. Then, from these 3 points, has there been a major cultural contact between India and Ethiopia, whereby Jain influence is possible, direct contact between Ethiopia and India, and the influence from the Jain side to Ethiopia has been a direct influence. So is it possible? Could it be a direct cultural influence of India on Ethiopia or the rivers? This is one issue. The other issue is, has there been Jain influence in Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Greek or Egypt? Because Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Greek or Egypt have relations with Ethiopia, direct and indirect relations in Ethiopia, and their influence could be found everywhere in this country. So could the influence on Ethiopia be through this ancient civilization? So when we talk of the influence of Jainism on Ethiopia, we have two possibilities. The first possibility is direct link between India, the Indus civilization, and Ethiopia, the ancient civilization of Aksum, or an indirect link via Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Greek, or Egypt. These are possible research areas for Ethiopian and Jain scholars. For now, what I want to say is this. My presentation is based simply on observation and on some enlightenment through my participation in some conferences and in some studies. To me, this is a very interesting topic. It needs a thorough research. Therefore, this research has to be carried out by able scholars who have good knowledge on cultural contact. And this cultural contact is the basis for the possibility of influence on both sides of the world, that is Asia in the East and Ethiopia in Africa. To do this research, universities should join hands, because the universities have the possibility and the mandate of doing research. But when I come to Jainism, Jainism is not known in Ethiopia. Jainism is not a point of interest for our students yet. Therefore, granting scholarship, initiating research works has to be taken by the Jain side, especially by the All Indian Heritage Preservation Organization. And this scholarship has to be a very serious scholarship. I know that His Excellency Babuji has given us last year a scholarship for 2 or 3 students, but this scholarship was or has been on cost-sharing base. So I have said that Jainism is not known in Ethiopia, and there are no scholars that have deeper interest in Jainism. However, there are traces that have to be studied. Therefore, the Jain side has to take the initiative, cover every cost, and initiate scholars who could come up with something tangible, with something good. Then once this area is known as a researchable area, scholars will flock into it. Otherwise, we are on the dark side. Though there are elements of similarity, there are grounds for further research. We are on the dark side. Therefore, as you have started doing it, Babuji and your organization and other universities in India and other Jains who are interested in African studies have to take this initiative and encourage scholars, young scholars in Ethiopia to do their research in this field of study. In this way, I think the research area could be rewarding, and it could initiate others to join similar studies. So this is what I have to share with you today, and I thank you for your patience and your understanding and your follow-up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Kevede. Now I would like to give attention to all the audience that there is a button in your mobile or otherwise more, and you can go there and you can raise hand. There is a facility to raise hand. You can you remove your now this PPT? Professor Kevede, can you remove this?
Please stop share screen.
Yes. And now
Screen share stop.
Yes.
Can you see
Stop
me?
the screen. Yes. Remove the screen share.
Okay.
And now there is a question time. Please remove your this thing.
I will.
Now you remove your laptop screen and come to the
I can
At
see
the
you.
top, the screen share stops button.
Yes. There is already raised hand is there of Mr. Dheeraj Keshriwal.
Kasliwal.
धीरज कासलीवाल. Yes. So can I, शिवम जी आप उनको पूछिए. Hello, Mr. Dheeraj Kasliwal, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Please
Please
unmute.
stop your share screen.
Yeah, please. And now you can ask your question.
First of all, good afternoon, Rajmal sir. Good afternoon, Kebede sir. It was a really nice session, which shows the similarities between Ethiopian churches and Jain temples. I would like to ask that question: when we study of that similarities, then we can able to study there are structure of different kinds of rocks. So by the different kinds of instrument, we can able to check that rocks is how many years old. There are some procedure like C14 or carbon dating procedure. So we can able to conclude that how many years that rock is standing over there.
Hello, Professor Kebede. Can you hear
Yes.
him?
Yes.
Can,
Yes.
yes.
We don't
Can you
have,
address this question?
yes, we don't have specific dates for this, but from the studies of these rock charts, some scholars have suggested that these rock charts existed, some existed before the birth of Christ and some after the birth of Christ. But majority of them are of the period after the birth of Christ.
Yes, sir.
Any other question, Mr. Kejriwal? Okay. Any other, somebody else who has?
No, sir.
Eh?
No questions more.
No, you please, you can go to more button, and there is an option for raise hand. You can use that and you can ask question. Yes, there is a question from number 2. Yes, can you, Shivam, can you unmute him? Number 2, who is the man? Please ask question.
Omkareshwar Pandey.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. And I heard about Professor Kevede's whole deliberations, and I was really amazed to listen his views. But do you find any similarities based on the structure and based on the, even the structures of temple and structures of mosques and other things are, by and large, there is similarity, but there is a huge difference between the two religions. Similarly, the basic difference between the Christianity and the Jainism is all about that Jains believe that the problem with humankind comes about because clean and pure souls are trapped in unclean and impure matter. The sense that the soul is pure and clean while everything material is
Hello.
impure runs throughout Jain belief and practice. And there is a different thinking about the God and our Tirthankars also. Christians believe that the God became human only once in the person of Jesus. And while Jainism believes that there were 24 revered Tirthankars, spiritual heroes who have shown the way to salvation. So how do you see this kind of comparison? Is it just a material comparison, or do you find the real comparison also, or real similarities also between Christianity and the Jainism? That is my question.
Thank you very much. This is a challenging question. In fact, I wouldn't try to answer everything, and I cannot give you a conclusive answer. I understand the difference between Christianity and Jainism. I understand how Jains believe, and I understand I have good knowledge about the 24 Tirthankars. But belief-wise, there are wide differences between Jainism and Christianity, and there are some elements that are related. Even in the belief itself, there are some similarities. I wouldn't go into details. Let me take this as a homework, and I may talk on it when I get the next opportunity. But in Ethiopia, especially in Tigray, we don't have ancient mosque structures. So I couldn't compare these Jain structures with ancient mosques, because there are some mosques, but I don't find any similarity between Indian temples and Ethiopian mosques. The only thing that I found so far is a similarity between Ethiopian church and Indian temples. That is what I can say, sir.
Okay.
Any other question? Anybody has
No.
any?
No questions, Rajmal ji. You
Okay,
start your lecture.
No. I have one question to Professor Kebede.
Okay.
Hello, Professor Kebede. Can I ask one question?
Please.
Yes. You told in the beginning, in your initial remarks, clarification about Addis. So I would like to know the word Addis is a Tigrian language word or it is Amharic word? I mean, how old this Addis word? Is it your Ethiopian language word or it is Tigrian old or it is Sabaean language word?
Professor, if you are referring to Addis Ababa, the
No,
capital.
not Addis. Addis is used in various Tigrian sites,
Yes.
many places.
Yes, Addi is sort of an adjective that has been there for some time, and it is a Tigrinya word. Addi is a Tigrinya word, and it refers to a place of, a land of, or a possession of. Okay, so north of the town of Mekelle, you will find another city which is known as Adigrat.
Yes.
Adigrat, Adi is the place of, and Grat is cultivable land. So the place of cultivable land is Adigrat. So Adi is a Tigrinya word. It's not Sabian. It's a Tigrinya word. It's not Amharic. Okay. So it's
No,
originated.
excuse me, sorry. You told the land of cultivation. You told her what?
Cultivable land. Land, a place of or an area of cultivable land.
Means agriculture related?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So if it is related to the word to the agriculture, then it is related to the Adinath. That is what the first signature, because Adinath gave the first technology is the agriculture technology.
I know.
And defense and culture, etc. Anyway, I mean, why I have a lot of concern on this, because Christianity, Islam, all these came after the first century AD and 7th century AD.
Yes.
And all these things which you are presenting or comparison or which I presented, I was talking first millennium BC. I mean, almost 3,000 years before present.
Yes.
So at that time, this word Addis, what was the meaning of that at that time, 3,000 years before? That is important.
Yeah, that has to be studied. I know that has to be studied.
Because there are lots of, I mean, Addis name are there surrounding to Mekelle, I mean, in Tigray region, etc. After 7th century, Muslim and as well as this Christianity came, then you know that in every country, not only in Ethiopia, in every country, the meaning of the word is intentionally being changed. I also have another question is related to the swastik. You are told that related to swastik, you have some kind of shown the cross. Cross is related to the Christianity. Am I right? Right?
Yes.
And swastik came 3,000, 4,000 years back. At that time, there was no cross.
Definitely.
Because there was no Christianity at that time.
Definitely.
So now, after the swastik, which was already existing, whatever the sites you showed, the cross is additionally, I mean, intentionally added at those places. Not
That's right.
it was existing earlier. This is my feeling. I may be wrong, 100% may be wrong, but this is what impression I took in Ethiopia and in other countries also, that these new things are added below the swastik. And swastik you have defined very well, very nicely. Thank you very much in the beginning, that it is related to the, I mean, auspicious or the many other things, etc. But it is related to many religions. It is not only in Jainism it is considered in Hinduism, Buddhism, even in Christianity also, and in Germany also, in many different aspects and different definition, etc. But what I wish to say, swastik is, I mean, existing since long.
Right.
And this cross is added only recently in this 2000 years.
Definitely. In
Very
my
much so.
discussion, I have said it is after the Middle Ages that swastik is adapted to Christianity. The Middle
Yes.
Ages is 12th, 13th century AD. So I know swastik is an old design related to Jainism. So it's a later addition, and it is used as some sort of stylized cross. It was not a cross,
Yes.
but it was used as a stylized cross. So I definitely agree with you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I appreciate your very nice talk on the similarities between the Ethiopian churches and the Jain temples, this structure, etc. This is really a big motivation for our Jain community to probe now again in Ethiopia. You have given us some guidelines that what we should probe and how to probe, etc. There was good discussion also. So thank you very much. Now there is a high time to invite my second speaker, Professor Ajit Prashad. Oh, there is some question. Just a minute. There is one more question. I'm sorry to hold you. Professor Pandey is there. Chakreshwar Pandey. Okareshwar
No,
Pandey. Professor.
I already asked the question.
Oh, okay. Just now I saw the hand raised. Now it has come. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so now Professor Ajit Prashad, have you joined? Are you already in? Hello, Professor Ajit Prashad. He has joined. Professor Ajit Prashad. Yes. अजीत प्रसाद ज्वाइन किए हैं शिवम?
हाँ जी, वो स्पॉटलाइट पे है।
अच्छा, स्पॉटलाइट पे हैं। हेलो।
हाँ जी, आपको आवाज आ रही है?
हाँ, मेरी आवाज आ रही है प्रोफेसर अजीत प्रसाद?
Yeah, it's quite clear.
Okay,
Can you
very
hear
good.
me?
Yes,
Can
yes.
you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
I can hear you now. I can hear you. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, now I would like to introduce my second speaker, Professor Ajit Prashad, who is going to talk today on aspects of Lesia in global perspectives. Professor Ajit Prashad is, after doing his MA in Kannada language, and then he was professor in Dhavla College in Mudbidri until 2016, from where he retired. Professor Ajit Prashad has I should say he's a multi-diversified field person, right from not only teaching, but writing novels, dramas, etc. on the cinematic language side also. And he has done many things. So Professor Ajit Prashad, he has published 4 novels already have been published by him, and 2 are under publication. Still he has written, and I hope he is still in the process writing more novels. Professor Ajit Prashad is basically has done a lot of popularization of Jainism, not only in Kerala, not only in India, but outside India also. And he has visited more than 6 countries to take this Jainism as a mission outside the India. Professor Ajit Prashad he has done a lot of drama work, and he has played the dramas, he has written the dramas, he has done the work for All India Radio also, for this kind of drama, as a drama director, and many things which he has done in Kannada language. He has translated even, and he communicated, disseminated the knowledge of Jainism in Kerala as well as other parts of India also. And recently in 2019, he visited Ethiopia to teach Jainism over there, and he spent 1 month over there to teach Jainism, and he also has visited the places. And finally, I mean, as a member of All India Digambar Jain Mahasabha, he and we all believe that Ethiopia may be the real place, not only the cradle of human evolution, but it is really appears a cradle of the Jainism evolution or something like that. Now the scenario has changed, but we can probe again, and we all are in that process. With all these kind words about his introduction, he is really a very big scholar and good knowledge about the Jainism. I invite Professor Ajit Prashad to deliver his talk on various aspects of Leshias in global perspectives. Professor Ajit Prashad.
Thank you, and very kind of you, Professor Rajmal ji, for introducing me in a great way. And in fact, I have been lucky enough to visit Mekelle University, as well as I met Dr. Kebede. I was there for about 40 days in Mekelle, for that matter. And along with Professor Mandal from Mekelle University and from Abhijit from Mysore University, I have roamed here and there in around Mekelle also, and I have found many giant sites for that matter. And the last week also, Professor Rajmalji was telling all these things. Research work has been done in Mekelle, and today also Dr. Kebede was telling. And of course, my subject is a little bit different from this. I'm not today. I'm not concentrating on the research work of about Jainism in Ethiopia, but still, when I was there in Ethiopia, I found a little bit surprising things. It's a surprise package to me. Most of the Ethiopians, I found that they have a fond over fasting. It's the basic concept of Jains. Now, they fast. I came to know that some people go for fasting for about 30 days and 40 days and other things. And during the marriage session, in fact, Professor Mandal was kind enough me to take me to a marriage session in Ethiopia. There, I found that many vegetarian foods were surprised. And in fact, I was talking to the local people there, and they were telling that they are more bent on this vegetarian food style. But still, the time has changed now, and everything has changed. And now they have been doing all these things. Actually, when during that wedding session, I found a lot of similarities with the Indian culture, Indian tradition, particularly the hunting tradition, the welcoming dance and dancing around in and around the fireballs and all the other things. It was quite interesting. And in fact, I was very surprised to know that twice in a week, the Ethiopian Airlines, they don't supply non-vegetarian food also in Ethiopian Airlines. That's very interesting. And these are the things which I was able to observe when I was in Mekelle. And let me take over from Mekelle to the subject concerned today. I mean, that subject which was given to me by Professor Rajmalji. And the concept of Lesha, of Jainism, Jain principle, and I would like to connect the concept of Lesha into modern thoughts. Before that, let me make it very clear what is Lesha. And let me begin my session with a story. The story of Prasanna Raj. This is the story of Prasanna Raj. Once Maharaj Shrenik was going to Samosaran of Bhagavan Mahavir, And on the way to Samosaran, in the middle of the forest, he sees a meditating sadhu. Now, Shrenik was deeply impressed by the look at the sadhu. And the Shrenik was goes to Bhagavan Mahavir Samosaran. First, let me apologize with all of you that I was not able to get connected my laptop to the session. I tried it really hard, but I could not get it. So that I'm not able to present my this one slides and all the other things. So I will take it in this way only. I would like to tell it whatever the things I need to tell. Okay, let me go back to the story now. Shrenik goes to Bhagavan Mahavir's Samosaran, and there Shrenik asked Bhagavan Mahavir, if that meditating sadhu dies at this fraction of a second, where does he go? Bhagavan Mahavir says that sadhu goes to the seventh hell. And Shrenik was really shocked to listen what Mahavir was telling. That sadhu was doing a deep this one dhyan. How can he go to a hell, that to seventh hell? Shocked, Shrenik again asked. He thought maybe Bhagavan Mahavir has not listened to what I'm asking, what the question which I was asking. So again he asked, you mean to say that sadhu goes to the seventh hell? If he dies at this fraction of it, please make it note, if he dies at this fraction of a second, now Bhagavan Mahavir says he goes to Sarvartha Siddhi. Now Shrenik got confused, fully he was confused. Bhagavan Mahavir is giving two types of answer to the same question. Again, as Bhagavan Mahavir, if he really goes to Sarvartha Siddhi, if he dies at this fraction of a second, then Bhagavan Mahavir says, no, if he dies at this fraction of a second, that sadhu will get the ultimate salvation. He goes to moksha. Shrenik got fully confused. He asked Bhagavan, Lord, you are giving three different type of answers for the same question. Bhagavan Mahavir answers. He says, when you asked me for the first time, where does that sadhu gets reborn? No, I said he goes to seventh hell. The reason is that when you are having dialogue with me now, but at the same time, there in that forest, an army of soldiers were moving there. That army of soldiers were trying to attack and kill the son of that sadhu. Previously, that sadhu was a king. And he left all his entire wealth and other things, and he gave the power to his son, and he went for meditation. He became a sadhu. When the army was moving, the two soldiers were discussing between themselves that they are going to kill that new king. Why? Hearing that answer, this sadhu got agitated. Although he was meditating, he was able to hear what the two soldiers were telling. He got agitated. And when he got agitated and he got angry, you put that question. When you ask me, if that sadhu dies at this fraction of a second, and that fraction of a second was that, a sadhu was agitated, he got angry, he wanted to lift a sword and he wanted to fight. And within a fraction of a second, the sadhu consoled himself. Now he started thinking himself, what the hell I am doing? See, I have become a sadhu now. I have left out all the relationships, all the worldly wealth and all the other things. I have become a sadhu and I am meditating. And now I am thinking that to take out that sword and to fight? No, I am doing a mistake. It's a sin. I must not think in that way. See, I have already detached from my family relationships. Now I am nobody. I am only a sadhu trying to attain the ultimate salvation. When this part of emotions came, you asked me the second time, if that sadhu dies at this fraction of a second, where does he go? A simple answer is that when he was able to think the mistakes which he was committing, he regained his sadhutva and started to meditate himself. And that fraction of a time, if he was dead, he might have gone to Sarvata Siddhi. You asked me the same question third time. You know, when you ask the same question, where did that sadhu will get reborn when he dies at this fraction of a second? I told you he is going to get the ultimate salvation, because at that fraction of a second, he was just stopped thinking all the worldly things. He was concentrating on his samyaktva. He was just thinking about the samyak darshan jnana charitra, and he was doing his shuklatya. When performing the shukladhyam, if one dies, you know, he will get either the sarvartha siddhi or the ultimate salvation or moksha. And Bhagavan Mahavir says, now you have to clearly understand what Mahavir wanted to tell, wanted to communicate to Sreni. Bhagavan Mahavir says now, look, mind always have oscillations. The emotions of all living beings changes from second to second, minute to minute, time to time. It results in different types of leshas. So when the oscillation of mind happens, that the emotions of all beings started changing from second to second, minute to minute, time to time, the leshas also will be changing. It results in different types of leshas. So now the question comes, what is lesha? Let me put it very clearly in as simple as possible way. The power of karma skandha surrounding the soul or atman is called a lesha. Once again, I would like to repeat it. The power of karma skandha surrounding the atman or soul is called lesha. Lesha reflects the living style, the contrast feelings, good and bad, good and evil, like that. It reflects the contrast feelings. Lesha refers to the state of mind, mental attitude. Let me repeat. Lesha refers to the state of mind and mental attitude. And our activities, our activities reflects our attitude. The reflection of a flower we can see under a pure water. Likewise, the reflection of karma related things can be seen over the soul. Let me repeat it. The reflection of a flower can be seen under pure water. Likewise, the reflection of karma-related things can be seen over soul. All living beings will be covered by this karma skandha. Only liberated souls are not affected by leshyas. Now let me go detail of lesya. According to the nature of lesya, it is divided into two parts. According to the nature of lesya, the first one is called dravya lesya, and the second one is called bhava lesya. And dravya lesya, it is the result of nama karma. This lesya will remain until the death. Bhava lesya is the result of mohaniya karma. Bhava means emotions. Emotions are bound to change every time. And this bhava lesya, according to the the variations of the bhavas or the emotions, it has been classified into tivra, tivratara, and tivratama. I can put it in this way: intense, more intense, and highly intense. And the fourth one is manda, that is weak. So the four stages of bhava lesya is tivra, tivratama, tivratara, tivratama, and manda. And the fifth one is weaker, that is mandatara. The sixth one is weakest, that is mandatama. So these are the 6 types of the emotions, the variations of the variations of our emotions. And according to the variations of these emotions, the acharyas have classified these leshyas into 6 types. The first one is called Krishna lesya. The second one is called Bhava lesya. The third one is called Kapot lesya. The fourth one is called Tejo lesya. The fifth one is called Padma lesya. And the sixth one is Shukla lesya. And these leshyas are divided into 2 parts. Number one is Ashubha lesya, and the second one is called Shubha lesya. And under this category, the first 3 leshyas, which I have just now I told, the number one is Krishna lesya, the second one is Neela lesya, and the third one is Kapot lesya. These are the 3 leshyas comes under the Ashubha leshyas. And the type of Shubha leshyas are this one, number 4th one in the serial of that leshyas. Here it is number 1, that is called Tejo lesya. And the next one, according to that list, it is 5th one. And here it is the 2nd one, the Padma lesya. And third one is called Shukla lesya, 6th in that category, and third one here. The first 3, out of these 6 leshyas, which I have already told you, these the first 3 leshyas, Krishna, Kapota, Neel, these are the 3 Ashubha leshyas, and the other remaining 3 leshyas are called good leshyas. And now the interesting part, how we are going to interpret this leshyas into the modern scenario. Our acharyas, they are so wise. They have put these leshyas in a very simple way. And they have connected the leshyas to understand what is lesya and what is the result of glacier, and if you are not go through the glaciers, they have come, this one, the glaciers have been connected to the colors. So colors are connected to glacier to understand what the glaciers in a better way. So each glacier is different, is represented by different colors, and the details of these glaciers are like this. Krishna glacier is supported or represented by black color. The Nila glacier is represented by blue color, and the Kapoth glacier is represented by brown color, and Tejo glacier is represented by red color. Padma glacier is represented by yellow color, and finally the Shukla glacier is covered by, represented by white color. Let me repeat. Krishna glacier represented by black, Nila glacier represented by blue, Kapoth glacier represented by brown, Tejo glacier is represented by red, Padma glacier is represented by yellow, and Shukla glacier is represented by white. To understand the glaciers in a better way, there is a very beautiful story. If you understand the story, then it is very easy to understand the different types of glaciers, the 6 types of glaciers. Now, once 6 friends were going to an unknown place. When they were going, they lost their way in the middle of the forest. They were hungry, they were thirsty, and they wanted to find out something to eat, something to drink. When they were roaming in the forest, they went in search of water and some fruits. And of course, the fruits are available in forest. We have to find it out. We have to find it, search for that. Finally, they found a fruit tree. Now, the interesting situation is like this. There are 6 friends. There is one fruit tree. Fruit tree is there. How they react now is a special case of psychology. That's this is the greatness of this concept. This is a psychological analysis. See, the first friend says, let us cut down this tree and get the fruit. Let us cut down this tree and get down the fruit. Let us get the fruit. The second one says, don't cut the tree. Why you want to cut the tree? Cut off a big branch instead. Now the third friend says, why we need to cut a big branch? A small branch will do. It is having enough fruits. Now the fourth one says, see, why don't we need to, we don't need to cut the branches like that. Let's climb up and get the bunches of fruits. The fifth one says, why pick so many fruits and waste them? Instead, just pick the fruit that we need to. That's all. The sixth one says, there are plenty of good fruits laying on the ground. Plenty of fruits are laying on the ground. It's very good. There's no problem with the fruits. So let's get them to first. First, we will eat the fruits which are laying on the floor. Again, we recollect the things about that friends. The first one says to cut off a tree and get whatever the fruits they want to eat. The second one says he opposes to cutting off the full tree, the whole tree. He says instead cut off a big branch. The third one says we don't want to cut off a big branch. Instead, we will cut a small one. The fourth one says, we don't need to cut the branches. Let us climb up and get the bunches of fruits. The fifth one says, why pick so many fruits and waste it? Instead, just pick the fruit that we need to eat. And just underscore the reaction of the sixth friend, he says, there are plenty of fruits lying on the floor, laying on the ground. So let us collect the things. Let us collect the fruits which is laying on the floor. The first friend represents the Krishna Lesha. He wanted to cut the whole tree itself, you know. He belongs to Krishna Lesha. And the second friend represents Nilesha. The third friend represents Kapotulesha. The fourth friend represents the Tejolesha. The fifth one represents the Padmalesha. And the sixth friend represents the Shuklalesha. The first three, Krishnalesha, Neelalesha, and Kapothalesha. The first three friends belong to Ashubha Bhavan, Ashubha Leshyas. And the last three one are enjoying the Shubha Leshyas. So, this story has attracted the modern marketing magnates. That's very important. This story has attracted the modern marketing magnates. They are using this to understand the mood of the buyers. And this story and concept of Lesha got the attention of psychologists too, to understand the human behavior under behavioral science. So there is a special branch in psychology that is called behavioral science. And now they have the behavioral science scholars, now they have came to know the significance of this Lesha, and now they are trying to implement the concept of this Lesha in treating their patients. Now, let me go in detail one by one. The nature of Krishna Lesha. The person who is under the mindset of Krishna Lesha, you know, there are some characters which we can make point by point. The man who is under the influence of Krishna Lesha, he is not having no compassion or mercy towards others. That's why he wanted to cut the tree. And they are highly short-tempered by nature. So if at all anybody is there who are highly short-tempered, they must know that they belong to Krishna Lesha. And they always love to torture others. They are highly short-tempered and they always love to torture others. They enjoy violence. Always jealousy and ill will towards others. They are always jealousy with others. And they are always wanted to do ill will to others. They are filled with animosity and malice. They do not believe in religion. Very important. They don't believe in religion. And people are afraid of these type of people. Let me make it, tell it again. People are afraid to approach the people who are under the influence of Krishna Lesha. And if somebody dies in this state of mind, just remember what Bhagavan Mahavira told to Srenik Maharaj. If somebody dies in this state of mind, the mind of Krishna Lesha, that soul goes to the hell. That's what Mahavira wanted to make it very clear to Srenik. And the second one is Neelalesha. This is represented by blue in color. No, people in this state of mind, basically they are very proud. They are very haughty and they are very lazy. They don't work hard. They are unreliable. You cannot rely the people who are under the influence of Nilalacia, and they are cheaters by nature. They are cheaters. They are cowards and hypocrites. These are the main three characters. They are hypocrites, they are cowards, they don't dare enough to have a fight, straight face-to-face fight, they don't do it. And they are hypocrites. Their behavior is different, their thoughts are in the mind and soul totally different. And they don't have a religious mentality. Not at all religious kind of people. If in this mindset, and repeatedly I'm telling that this the mind always oscillation will be having oscillations, If a living being dies in this mindset, their soul will be reborn as plants. I repeat, if a man dies under the influence of Nilalacia, they will be having a reborn as plants. The third one is Kapothalacia. The mindset of Kapothalacia is they're always sad and gloomy. They don't know how to enjoy their life. They're always sad. They're always gloomy. Always find fault with others. See, it is a very critical analysis. They always find fault with others. Have the tendency of self-boasting. They always love to boast themselves. I am like this, I am like that, like that. They always enjoy self-boasting and overreact and over-excited for small things. Very interesting, That's why the marketing people and the psychologists are interested to understand more and more about Lasias. They overreact and they are over-excited for small things. Like that, if a man dies in this state of mind, that soul will be reborn as animals. So animals are the result of the Kapothalacia. That Lacia is represented by brown color. So at this state of mind, if somebody dies, they will be reborn as animals. And the fourth one is Tejolacia, that is represented by red color. This mindset of Lacia is like that. They are very careful. They are very, very careful about their action. They are very particular. They care a lot about their action. They can discriminate between good and bad, the things to do and things not to do. They can discriminate it. They know what is right and what is wrong. They are kind, benevolent, and they are religious-minded people. And they would love to enjoy a harmonious life. They don't want to fight with others. They want to enjoy a harmonious life with others. If a man dies under this mindset, they will be reborn as human beings only. Very interesting. If they die at this mindset, they will be reborn as a human being. And the fifth one, very important. Fifth one and sixth one is very important. Actually, the fourth one, it is between the bad Lacia and good Lacia. It is between a bad people and a good people. It is between a bad nature and a good nature. Now comes the uphill. Padma Lacia. This when a man is having this mindset, the mindset people, this type of mindset people, basically they are very, very kind in heart. They are benevolent. They have the nature of forgiveness. Oh, today is the Dashalakshana, the first day of Dashalakshana Mahaparv. And Dashalakshana Mahaparv the first day of Dashalakshana Mahaparv is Uttama Kshamadharam. And this Uttama Kshamadharam is the basic nature of a man of Padmalesha. They have the nature of forgiveness. They can forgive not only human beings, even to animals. Even an animal comes and harm, if a dog comes and bites him, no, he doesn't get angry over the dog. He is prepared to forgive even that dog also. So they can forgive even their animals and leave alone. Even they are prepared to forgive even their animals. See that after the 10th day of this Maha Parva, 11th day we are celebrating Kshamavani. We will ask Kshame with all other people. So we request other people to Kshama dene ke liye, to forgive us. The funny thing is that whom we are going to ask forgiveness, we ask the people with whom we don't have fight. Actually, we are supposed to ask forgiveness to the people with whom we have fought. With our enemies, we have to ask forgiveness. Instead of nowadays, it's become a fashion to ask forgiveness for the people of our own community, for the people of our own close friends, our own relatives, like that. It should not have been like that. Nature of forgiveness, to forgive everything. Kamami savva jivana, savve jiva kamantume. Mittime savva bhuteshu, vairam madhyanna kenachi. So we are supposed to forgive even to our enemies. We don't have a bad feelings towards our enemies. That is the symptom of a man with Padmalesha. They can forgive their enemies also. They observe some austerities. Vigilant in keeping their vows till their death. That is very important. They keep up the promise. Whatever the promise they give, simply they will keep it up. Until the last breath, until they die, they keep up their promises. That's very important. And श्रमण को हम बोलते हैं, श्रमण वो है उनके साथ जिसके साथ समता भाव है. समता भाव ही श्रमण का लक्षण होता है. One who is having a look without any parity, without any differences, he can look each and everyone equally. That is called Samata Bhav. And this Padmalesha, the character of this Padmalesha is that the man will not at all be affected by sorrow or joy. He takes both the things, good and bad. He takes it, okay, it's good, okay, it's bad. No overreaction. He takes the things as it comes. If the sorrow is there, okay, he will take that also. If good things is happening, he takes that on also. So that he is having that Samata Bhav in his mind. If someone dies, at this state of mind, kind and benevolent, having forgiveness, can forgive the enemies also, and who is following some principles in his life, who is not at all affected by sorrow and joy, who is having a Samata Bhavana, who is always vigilant to keep up his words until his death. These are the main characters. If a man dies at this state of mind, at this fraction of a second, if he dies, they will be reborn as celestial beings. They will become devatas. They will become celestial beings. And lastly, the Shukla Lesha. Shukla Lesha is represented by white. White is the symbol of purity. Dhaval Varn, purity का संकेत हो जाता है. हमारा पुराण शास्त्र ग्रंथ वो धवल है. In fact, I was working in Dhavala College. That college was named by Acharya Vidyanand Sagar ji. That Dhaval, Jai Dhaval or Mahadhaval, the sacred books of Jains. And this Lesha is represented by Dhaval. That's white. And the man who is having this mindset, they strictly follow the principles of non-violence. They strictly follow truth, non-stealing, celibacy, and non-attachment. They are the trustworthy people. Treat every soul as if it is their own soul. यही है समता भाव का explanation, पक्का explanation. Treat every soul as if it is his own soul. And don't have negative feelings even for their enemies. They don't have negative feelings. वो समता भाव उनका मन में है. And even if somebody comes and abuses them, they keep their composure. They don't get irritated. They don't react. If somebody comes and abuses or tries to insult, ये महामुनियों लोग ऐसे ही हो जाता है. और it happens like that. Even some upasarga happens to Munivar. वो मुनिवर का ऊपर कुछ उपसर्ग हो जाता है. They don't react. They take the things as it comes. Even abused by others, they keep their composure and no attachment. They are totally detached from this worldly affair. Totally detached, and they don't hate anybody. No hatredness at all. They doesn't have any attachment, nor they don't have any hatredness towards others. So that's why they don't have any enemies. They don't have any friends. See, if you have enemies, you will be having dvesh, the hatredness. If you have friends, you will be having love, affection. भगवान राग द्वेष ये दोनों भावनाओं से ऊपर हो जाता है ना. That's why raga dvesh, they don't have raga or dvesh, that love or hatredness. That the result is that they don't become sad and they don't become happy also. That's why we call Bhagavan Nirvikar. Nirvikar का मतलब यही होता है. They don't become sad, they don't become happy, they don't get rag, they don't get dvesh. If a person dies at this mindset, this fraction of a second, if they die in this fraction of a second, that soul will be liberated from the cycle of birth and rebirth, and they themselves will become Jinendra Bhagavan. And the Shukla Lesha में ऐसे ही हो जाता है. So let us try to control our emotions first. Let us try to control our mind. Let the noble thoughts come from all the corners. We will receive all the noble thoughts from all the corners. Let us try to avoid Ashubha Parinam, the first three leshas. Let us try to avoid the first three Ashubha Parinam. Let us always try to have the Shubha Parinam. भावना से धर्म हो जाता है, भावनाओं से कर्म हो जाता है, भावनाओं से मुक्ति भी मिल जाता है, भावनाओं से नरक भी मिल जाता है. So let us always try to control to have Shubha Parinam. Let us try to reach Shukla Lesha. Thank you. And before I conclude, I must, I'm very happy that I have got this opportunity to share my feelings because of All India Digambar Jain Mahasabha, Professor Rajmalji, the program coordinator, my dear friend and friends all over here, who is having patience listening to me, and more than that, Nirmal Kumar Sethi ji, the president of Digambar Jain Mahasabha, and once again I thank you one and all. Namaskar.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Ajit Prashad, for an excellent talk. Very, very nice talk and very good content of your material also for this talk. You have explained very nicely the state of mind for different kind of leshas. Very nice. Now I would like to invite questions. If there are some questions, then please go to the more button, raise your hand and just give signal to us. Please, if there are questions, please ask questions. शिवम भाई कुछ
अगर
है?
किसी को कोई क्वेश्चन है तो अपने मोबाइल के राइट हैंड कॉर्नर में मोर नाम का एक ऑप्शन है, वहां जाइए और सबसे बॉटम में मोर नाम का ऑप्शन है, हैंड रेस नाम का ऑप्शन है, वहां पे क्लिक कीजिए। अगर आपको किसी को कोई क्वेश्चन पूछना है तो हम आपका संपर्क प्रोफेसर अजित प्रसाद जी से कर सकते हो, तो आप अपने क्वेश्चंस का समाधान निकाल सकते हैं।
ऐसा लगता है कि शायद
किसी को कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं है,
क्वेश्चन नहीं है,
तो हम
मैं
आप ही
हाँ।
कोई क्वेश्चन हो तो क्लियर कर लीजिए।
हाँ नहीं, मुझे Ajit Prashad ji, can I ask one question, Professor Ajit Prashad, to you? Are you ready?
Sure.
Yes. So you have distributed, you see, the all people of the world into the 6 formats, starting from Krishna Lesha to the Shukla Lesha. There are 6 types of people. That is what you want to say. Am I right?
Yes.
So, and these 6 peoples also in the Leshyas, whatever they do, the Karma Skandha, it is also divided into different magnitudes, that is intensity of that Leshya.
Yes.
And that is also, I think, 6 different types of intensities are there, starting from very high magnitude to the very weakest one.
Yes. You are right, sir.
Yeah, yes. So now, do you think that even for a given person of one kind of a Leshya, but depending on the intensity, he will go to the different kind of, rebirth.
Yes.
Not just by one Leshya color or one kind of that, but depending also on the magnitude.
Yes. No, actually, I was repeatedly telling you, telling one thing.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Bhagavan Mahavir ne bola na, mind
Yes.
always oscillates. I made that point very clear in the beginning itself. The oscillation of mind decides in which Lesha we are. And accordingly, we will get the result. And the problem is that we always insist on concentrating our own mind and controlling our own emotions. If at all we are in a position to control our emotions and control our mindset, from that second onwards, we can move from Krishna Lesha to Shukla Lesha. See, from Shukla Lesha itself, from there, it is not a guaranteed position. We can slip down from Shukla Lesha to Krishna Lesha at any moment. So this is the real challenge of a real sadhu, to maintain that Lesha, that mindset continuously to attain the ultimate salvation. So the mind oscillates, the emotions will be changing, it's bound to change. as we are all know, our own mind changes from every time to time. See, for a 1 hour session, if a participant comes and sit there, all the 60 minutes he cannot concentrate on this session itself. It's right, you know. Our mind will be oscillating somewhere. Sometimes we will be coming from outside in our mind. Of course, we are sitting here, but at the same time, our mind will be roaming here and there. When I was talking about Ethiopia, I was there practically. My mind was there in Ethiopia with Mandal, with Kabad, and with Mekelle University and others. See, this is the situation. Our mind always oscillates.
Yes.
The challenge is that how to control that oscillating mind and take our mind and emotions to the level of Shukla-Rishi.
Yes. Yes, please go ahead.
And at the same time, if you want to know what's the significance of this understanding or studying the Laishas in modern times, these marketing people, they know how to catch a customer. How they will come to know? First, they will observe the psychology of a customer. They observe what he needs instead of what they want to give first. And then they analyze his behavior, try to understand his mindset, and then try to do the business with him. The same way the psychologists do. The psychologists also do the same thing. If in sitting with a patient, first they will listen what the patient wants to tell patients. Then they will analyze the mindset of that person. And then they will try to find out a remedy for the problems of that patient.
Okay, Professor Ajit Prasad, thank you very much. Now I will humbly request and invite Professor Tribhuvan Prasad. He is a head of Department of African Studies in Delhi University. He is there to blaze us today. I humbly invite Professor Tribhuvan Prasad. Can you hear me, sir? Sir, are you there? Can you hear me? Hello, Professor Prasad.
Yeah, I am here.
Okay, please, I humbly invite you, sir. Please give your kind blessings to us.
Oh, I was really happy. I'm excited to share my thoughts as well as the thoughts from. Hello. There's an interruption between. I had a call from my son who is there in Paris. So I'm sorry, really, I beg my pardon. Okay, I'm really excited to get this opportunity to share my thoughts with regarding Laishas in front of an enlightened audience, with enlightened people like you and all. Particularly, I'm happy to see that our Dadaji is there, Babuji is there, Nirmal Setiji, and many of my friends I can see here. I'm really happy to share my thoughts, and again, I would like to say thank you very much. I'm really happy to have this session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ajit Prasad. Thank you very much, and accepting our invitation to give talk in this session. Thank you. Now I invite Professor Tribhuvan Prasad. He is the head of Department of African Studies in Delhi University. Can you hear me, sir?
जी वो त्रिभुवन प्रसाद नाम से कोई डिवाइस नहीं है.
प्रोफेसर त्रिभुवन प्रसाद
जी.
हेलो.
ऐसे नाम से तो कोई डिवाइस नहीं है.
कोई
वो थे तो सही, अभी चले गए होंगे.
अच्छा. Okay, if he is not there, then I will sincerely invite our President Shri Nirmal Kumar Ji Sethi to give address and give blessings to us.
मैं त्रिभुवन प्रसाद को बोल रहा हूँ, अगर वो आ गए तो.
हाँ, बोलिए प्लीज. हाँ, बोलिए.
हेलो, निर्मल सेठी बोल रहा हूँ, आपको बुला रहे हैं. अभी उसे ज्वाइन करिए आप प्लीज. आपसे पूछ रहे, आप बोलिए. आशीर्वाद, ब्लेसिंग्स. अच्छा. Hello.
हाँ,
We are very thankful to Awade sir, Awade ji, and he has given very good information about Utopia churches and our temples there, Indian temple similarities, and he has given in very detail. Actually, he has visited the India 3 to 4 times, and he spent time seeing the temples and other things here. And he also studied Jainism, about Jainism in the classes, and has taken very keen interest. So his suggestion is to us is that we should try to have more research work done, research work in this field. And Mr. Kawade, you see that your president in last Sunday, he has announced 2 scholarship, PhD, and 2 scholarship, your DPhil, to 4 students. And we will also try to give those 4 students from our Mahasabha $1,500. Every 6 months, we will give $500 to them to see the things and to spend something what they are doing. So for that, we will help them, for the students, by giving each student $1,500. And we will also try this time now, this is a corona disease is there. So we could not invite students from all over the countries and particularly Utopia. But as soon as the situation improves, we will try to invite students here and give them training as we have arranged last year also. And so far your teaching there, as soon as your university will permit, we will send 2 scholars there in Utopia to continue those studies. And there is one person, he is very keen that such studies should continue not only 1 month or 2 months, it should continue for annual basis. So we'll try that also. And you see, main thing we found similarities is that in fasting and in vegetarianism. You see, the ancient people believe in vegetarianism in Utopia, this is sure. And fasting was also very common, and fasting is still very common. And so the impact of Western civilization has come to them. So they have become non-vegetarian also, and fasting is gradually reducing there. But originally they were believe in fasting, which is the basic thing of Jainism. And they believe in vegetarian food also. And particularly the caves are there, rock-cut caves are there. That is the proof that the Jain Rishi Munis, they used to do worship there in those caves. As Mr. Kawade has told, you see, there are connectivity with Egypt and with your Yemen and all these countries, because in the Middle East, Jainism was one time flourishing like anything. In Balochistan, our Burjes Rawat has written an article, Lucknow, that in Balochistan there are still images which are of Tirthankar there, which are more than 3,000 years old. In the museum, they have got the images in Balochistan. So in the Middle East area, there was the Jainism was there. In Turkey, we have found many caves which were concerned about Jain religion. So lot of research work has to be done in this field, and we are trying to seek help of Government of India also. If they come to help us in this project, it will be a very good thing for us. And so far, our Ajit Prasad ji is concerned. He is a great scholar, no doubt, and he went to Utopia and taught students there, about 30 to 40 students, and he is very scholarly. And about Jainism, he is a specialist in Jain subject, and we are very grateful to Ajit Prasad ji for delivering such a nice lecture today. And his continued help will augment this project. And at this today's meeting, we invited Tribhuvan Prasad ji, but he just now told me that he has called by some urgent work in the university, so he has to go there. Anyhow, his blessings are there, and because Tribhuvan Prasad ji is the head of Department of African Studies in Delhi University, and Delhi University is cooperating to us in this field, and we arranged 1 week classes last year with Delhi University. They arranged 1 week classes for foreign students there. So we will seek again the help of Delhi University and as well as JNU University, Jawaharlal Nehru University for these things. And I express my gratitude to Rajmal ji for arranging this thing. And next Sunday, we are also having the same thing. And we hope more people will join in this thing. And the relation between India and Ethiopia, and particularly with Jainism, will be fully established in time to come. I thank you again, Rajmal ji, and all the people who are being in this. Our Pandey ji is there, Omkar sir Pandey ji is there, and Mr. Saxena is there, Mr. Dheeraj Kasliwal, Mr. Vinod Jain from Mysore, and many people are there who have joined this. I express my thanks to everybody who have joined this our seminar, and we hope that next week they will also join. Thank you very much. Rajmal ji, you can conclude now.
Okay, thank you, Babuji. Now I humbly and sincerely express my thanks, regards to each and everyone, particularly to Professor Kebede, who gave very excellent talk today, and he has further motivated to prop the Jainism in Ethiopia. He has given some signatures. Similarly, Professor Ajit Prasad, who is a really very, very good scholar of Jainism, he has proven today, and who taught Jainism in Ethiopia, and he is an active member of our Mahasabha. So I express my sincere thanks to both of them to accept my invitation to give today the lectures, talks in this session. I say thank you very much to all of you. with उत्तम क्षमा के साथ में आप सभी से जाने अनजाने में कोई भी भूल की हो तो उसके लिए भी क्षमा मांगता हूँ. धन्यवाद. थैंक यू वेरी मच.
विजय कुमार जी ने भी ज्वाइन किया. विजय कुमार जी, अब सागर, और हमारे विनोद जी फ्रॉम मैसूर, ये ज्वाइन.
हाँ हाँ, सभी को मेरा उत्तम क्षमा के साथ में मेरा प्रणाम है, और आप सभी को बहुत बहुत आभार, धन्यवाद. और मैं आप सभी को अगले रविवार के लिए अगेन आई एम इनवाइटिंग टू ऑल ऑफ यू टू जॉइन अस फॉर नेक्स्ट संडे सेशन. थैंक यू वेरी मच.
रीना जी ने ज्वाइन किया है. सुमेर जी काला ने ज्वाइन किया है. Dilip Barjatya from Guwahati, he has also joined. Dilip Barjatya, and LC Jain has also joined. LC Jain from Jabalpur, he has joined us. Rita ji has also joined us. Arina ji, Rajkumar ji Sethi has joined. Vinay ji has joined. Thank you very much. Suresh Kumar ji Jain, thank you very much. Surendra ji Jain, Avinash ji Jain, Avinash ji Jain. And
तो चलिए इसी के साथ हम हमारे आज प्रोग्राम समाप्त करते हैं.
Thank you. Our Akshay Jain is joined. Keetu Jain has joined.